They tell you the first feeling is rage. That isn't true. The first feeling is relief, the kind that scares you because it feels good. Weight becomes a rumor. Doors forget they were ever obstacles. The ache that used to live behind your ribs like a clenched fist opens its hand and lets you breathe without counting. I curled my fingers around a steel brace, and the brace surrendered. Something inside me laughed, and for a minute I liked the sound. Stronger than I was, I said, because the sentence tasted like victory. The room, all tile and drains and instruments I could name without wanting to, did not disagree. Lights hummed in a cold key. A vent whispered antiseptic promises. Somewhere behind the glass, someone took a note about my grip strength and wrote a number that meant nothing to anyone who had ever struggled with a stuck jar. My name used to be easy. It fit in a mouth. It sat comfortably on forms. Now it arrives late, like a guest who got lost on the way and won't admit it. When the intercom crackles, it uses a designation. I answer because the designation lands without arguments in the part of me that learned obedience before it learned ethics. The part with my name is smaller than it was. Not missing, just quieter, as if wrapped in gauze. They promise me purpose the way doctors promise rest. Stabilization, service. The words are clean. They slide across the floor without picking up dust. I stand when told, sit when told, hold when told. Holding is easy. Everything is easy. That's the problem. Ease is a solvent. It turns questions into shapes you can lift and set aside. I remember the dip in pieces. Smell first, like the world forgot fruit. Warmth without comfort, weight without pressure. A caress made of chemistry. The liquid found my skin, and then my skin forgot it had a boundary. Cells woke with instructions too old to argue with. When I surfaced, the mirror had opinions. My shoulders didn't end where memory said they should. My jaw had decided to believe in angles. My voice crawled down a register until it found a steadiness that sounded like someone else's patience. They call the aftermath euphoria. It's not jumping and shouting. It's a quiet certainty that the hard world has finally decided to be honest with your bones. You lift, and the thing lifts. You push, and the thing moves. You stop waiting for a back to go out or a breath to run short. The certainty tempts you to trade all the small arguments that made you human for this one big agreement. You are built correctly now. I learned the price like a footnote. A tech with careful hands and a voice that wouldn't meet my eyes said the word sterile as if it were kindness. An expected outcome, he added, which is science for don't take it personally. I said I didn't. The room believed me. I didn't check whether I believed me. Sometimes I dream about the person who carried my name without needing to rehearse it. He had bad knees and a good laugh and plans that relied on time behaving. In the morning I stretch and the walls adjust. And the plans look like toys I don't have the fingers for anymore. Purpose arrives on a clipboard. I accept it. Acceptance is easier than hope when both weigh nothing. Stronger than I was, it's true. It's also incomplete. Strength came with a shape carved around it, and the shape is a corridor with doors on one side only. I can open any of them. I'm not sure I remember why I wanted to. Dusk makes liars out of distances. The road ahead looks close enough to touch. The town behind looks like a memory that hasn't decided if it's yours. I traded filters for caps and a promise. One more run. Then I could buy a seat with a caravan heading south, where the wind knows fewer names. On my pack, rope, tins, the little tinier things I'd learned to hoard, needles, thread, the good tape. In my head, the tally of how many days until safe. The radio was the kind of junk that sings after you beg it. 2 stations on a good ridge. One with static that pretended it had music in it. One with warnings that were really advertisements for fear. The third voice, new, cracked, human, breathed, "Anybody, help!" and then coughed a story of a broken axle and a kid with a fever. Coordinates rode in on the cough like fleas. I checked the map I kept in my head and hated how convenient the spot was. A bend where scrub grew taller than common sense. I told myself I'd stop on the ridge and glass the road. I told myself I could drop the pack and come back fast if it smelled wrong. I told myself names, mine and the ones I carried for other people, because names are leashes you hold from the inside. I walked anyway, because the sound of a sick kid makes better arguments than a lifetime of advice. The shimmer was wrong even before I knew the word for it. Heat makes air dance. This air stalked. I caught it at the corner of sight, a curtain that didn't know what wind should do. A stone moved where stones shouldn't. The radio clicked off without my hand on it. The last honest noise was my breath deciding to be louder. They stepped out wearing shadows that forgot to be still. Nightkin, though I didn't gift them the name until later. One was close enough that I learned a smell I don't have a word for. Dust, oil, and something like old metal that still remembers mouths. A sack rose like a moon and fell over my eyes. The world narrowed to canvas and knots. "Quiet," said a voice through teeth that had practiced quiet into a doctrine. Hands found wrists, wrists learned ropes, ankles discovered the neatness of chain. They lifted me like a crate, tilt, carry, set. Bodies that big moving with ceremony, not hurry. I listened for raiders' jokes and heard none. Discipline has its own sound, and it does not laugh. They didn't hit me. They didn't have to. I walked because walking made the sack less like drowning. Boots counted the road in numbers that didn't match any map I'd drawn. Once, the chain kissed rock and rang a note I knew from market mornings. A stool leg dragged on concrete. Memory tried to make home out of it and failed. They paused at a crest. The sack warmed with someone's breath near my ear. "Good stock," a different voice said, admiring as a butcher. Another voice answered from farther away, flat as a clipboard. "Mark for exposure. Note. Cooperative." They used numbers instead of names. I learned, fast, that numbers can be said without looking at a face. We moved again. The radio in my pack woke once, squawked a half-syllable, and died like a joke that remembered it was cruel. I thought about turning and running blind, about falling on the road so awkwardly they'd have to cut me free to keep the schedule. Somewhere, common sense raised a hand with all the reasons that was suicide. Somewhere smaller, the part of me that hoards foolishness whispered, "Try." The chain tugged the thought out of me like a tooth. When the sack finally lifted, the stars were wrong. Not the sky, my place under it. A fence made of angles loomed. A door pretended to be merciful. The big hands that had moved me set me down with a care that an ordinary enemy wouldn't waste. "Don't make us cover your head again," someone said, not unkindly. I nodded, and that was the first betrayal. I was already learning to agree in the new language. I told myself a last instruction in the old one. "Remember my name." I said it once, inside, like you test a lock you know is going to fail. Then the door opened and swallowed me into light that smelled like antiseptic and ambition. They took my name the way a clerk takes a coat, politely, efficiently, with a tag I wouldn't see again. The building had been something else once. Clean angles, pre-war confidence, a lobby that remembered being public. Now the lights were too honest, and the floors had opinions about squeaking. They sat me on a steel bench with other people who had the same look, still trying to decide whether cooperation was a strategy or a habit we couldn't unlearn. Intake is a corridor disguised as care. Height, weight. Bones guessed by a scanner that hummed like it had perfect pitch. A cuff tightened and read, "Pressures the old world used to fret over." A needle slid in with the bedside manner of a well-trained mosquito. Every answer created a new box, and every box asked to be filled. Donor quality, the tech murmured. Exposure curve, aggression profile. He said the words like weather. Not good, not bad, just something you prepare for. I discovered I could hate a clipboard. They shaved me to reduce contamination pathways. Hair landed on the tray and tried to arrange itself into something familiar. The wash was brisk and methodical, antiseptic that stung my nose, something ozonic that made the air taste like a lightning story. I left the room the way metal leaves a vat, stripped, humming slightly, convinced cleanliness could be a purpose. A guard watched with a patience that had muscles. When the other tech joked, "No more babies after this," the guard didn't laugh, only nodded like he'd heard a policy stated correctly. Sterility as feature, not flaw. Science loves a tidy outcome. They fitted an IV and offered water I didn't want. An intercom recited compliance, safety, calm, words that link arms near the end, as if unity can be manufactured out of cadence. Then the choirmaster arrived, the first person in a white coat who didn't pretend to be a doctor. His voice was careful, round, pleased with its own edges. He spoke about war as a math problem and about unity as its proven solution. FEV removes weakness, he said. Disease, doubt, division. He didn't say fear. He didn't have to. Every surface in the room said it for him. He promised order, strength, peace that doesn't negotiate. If the sermon had an altar call, it was made of steel and green glass. He pointed through a window where biogel shouldered the light in slow, viscous breaths. Behind glass, a pump made a gentle sound that I wanted to call a lullaby, until I remembered lullabies are for returning, not leaving. A tech logged my vitals in a column labeled baseline, a word that pretends to be neutral while planning your future. The choirmaster asked if I understood the gift. I said I understood being tired of losing. He smiled, triumphant, as if he'd won an argument I hadn't meant to have. They issued a garment with opinions only about access points. My old clothes disappeared into a bin that would outlive me. Someone read me risks and benefits at a speed that suggested the decision had already been filed. I listened for the part where my name would be returned with a stamp saying improved. It didn't come. Numbers fit better in their sentences. Breathe slow, a nurse advised, adjusting the drip. Helps with the shiver when you see the vat. She spoke like a person who stayed on her side of the glass and counted that a mercy. I tried the breathing. It worked until it didn't. In the last room before the last room, they drew lines on my skin with a marker that smelled like childhood art class. Placement marks, the tech explained, as if we were hanging a picture and not subtracting a person. I asked if anyone ever turned back. Errors are corrected, the choirmaster said gently. Variance decays. He loved those words, how they made surrender sound like physics. When they asked for any final questions, I tried mine on the new air. After, I said, what am I? The choirmaster's answer was smooth enough to drink. The same, he said, but more. I wanted to ask more what, but the door had already learned my weight and was opening. I stepped forward because corridors only teach one lesson. You move, or you are moved. They rolled the cradle as if it were a ceremony, and I was the candle. Straps crossed my chest with a hush that felt practiced. The room smelled like clean thunder. Through the glass, the vat waited, emerald and slow, breathing by machine. Pumps thumped like distant, considerate hearts. A nurse touched my wrist and said, "Exhale when you go under." Her voice had the gentleness of someone who never follows their patients where they're sent. The choirmaster stood where reflections made him more than one and said the word, "Unity like a benediction." I exhaled because obedience was the only thing I owned. Warm at first, then warmer, until warmth learned a new language that lived under the skin. The gel knew my mouth before it knew the rest of me. My throat panicked, and then the trick remembered there was oxygen in the green. Breathing became a choice I made with muscles that weren't lungs anymore. Every hair on my body sent up a flare and then surrendered. The pressure was everywhere and nowhere. The hug of a planet that had decided I was worth the squeeze. A pinprick electricity crawled up nerves that had only ever carried pain and now carried instruction. Heat like needle ants moved through me in files. Bones hummed, then ached, then found a note that matched the vat. Something aligned that had never been built to align. My heart argued. The gel won. I felt a seizure arrive without fear, precise, contained. Like a system reboot you scheduled because you'd already backed up the parts that mattered. The lights outside the glass turned into long, taut threads. My body plucked them until they sang the same pitch as the pumps. Thoughts smeared. Names dissolved into shapes. My sibling's face became warmth without features, a song without words. A lullaby I used to hum caught in a net and came up as sound without meaning. Memory tried to organize itself by taste and smell, childhood tricks, and found only sterile ozone, the mineral tang of a clean machine. The vat edited me gently and thoroughly, like a book being reprinted with certain adjectives removed. Muscles knotted, then lengthened, then learned to be new. The ache wasn't pain, it was labor. Fibers braided with a competence that felt older than instruction. Skin tightened the way a drum learns purpose. I felt my jaw reconsider the angles of my face from the inside. A slow casting, no mallet, no crack. Only pressure and the sense of decisions being made for my benefit. Bones thickened as if density were a kind of politeness I had been denied. The immune system I'd once congratulated for surviving winters received a medal and immediate retirement. Somewhere deep, a switch flipped that made the future of children irrelevant. Sterility arrived with the neutrality of physics. A feature, not a failure. I remembered what they say about the virus. That it isn't one thing, but many. A family that moves into every room and rearranges the furniture. A pan-viral invitation. Divide faster, grow denser, stop rotting, start obeying new blueprints. West-Tec wrote the first plans. The world after wrote footnotes. I became the footnote. The explanation was comforting because it was large. Large explanations can hold a person the way a tide holds a boat. I let it. Time didn't pass so much as negotiate. There were breaks in the pressure when I could count beats and pretend a minute was a wall I could lean on. Then another tide, another alignment, another gentle erasure. The parts of me that refused to be turned to numbers. Jokes, the soft weight of a hand on my neck. The exact gray of the road dust where I grew up. Thinned like soup stretched for one more bowl. When they raised me, the gel let go reluctantly. strings of green choosing me and then changing their minds. Air returned as a stranger, dry, thin, impolite. I tried to cough and produced a sound that startled the room. Lower, like floors below me had discovered they could speak. Consonants dragged across my new tongue as if the road had been salted. Vowels settled into a register where patience lives and anger doesn't need to shout. Hands wiped me down with towels that believed in friction. The straps came free with the tidy clicks of decisions that had found outcomes. I sat because sitting had always been a compromise between falling and standing. Now, it felt like a rehearsal for something I could do forever. The nurse checked vitals and called them beautiful, which is a word rooms like this are not supposed to use. I tried my name. It arrived late and heavy, a syllable with a limp. I set it on my lap and looked at it as if it belonged to a friend I hadn't seen since the market. The choirmaster leaned in, eyes bright with the holiness of results. He spoke the catechism: strength, immunity, order. Disease will not touch you now, he said. Doubt will not slow you. He didn't mention what had been removed. Maybe he thought I should be grateful not to know all the prices on the first day. He asked how I felt. More, I said, because the room wanted that word and because it was true the way a cleared debt is true. He smiled, triumphant at the rightness of his math. They led me past the glass. The vat watched me go, the way a well watches a bucket. Interested? Sure the world comes back eventually. My hands, were too sure of the rail. Fingers that had once learned stitches and knots now looked like tools that would snap thread out of boredom. A door that asked to be opened yielded before I finished deciding what to do about it. In the mirror, a stranger stood where I had expected grief to be. Shoulders that ignored shirts, skin that remembered pressure and had thoughts about armor. A face where the jaw had learned discipline. Eyes the same, I wanted to say. But the sentence refused to finish. Sameness is a luxury of small changes. I said my name again, on purpose. The first syllable landed, the second slid. My name was, I tried, and the rest scattered like birds. The nurse pretended not to hear the missing part. The room didn't pretend anything. Behind us, the pump kept time. The gel blinked its green. Somewhere, a clipboard wrote baseline completed and started a new column with a better word. I walked where they pointed me, light in the way heavy things sometimes are when they finally discover what they were built to lift. The corridor outside hadn't changed. I had. The door closed behind us with a hiss that sounded like a name leaving a mouth and not coming back. They call it recovery, but recovery implies a return. This was debut. The body woke like it had been waiting its whole life for permission. Grip found texture it used to miss. The mill marks on steel, the burr on a bolt, the tiny seam in a plastic handle, and made sermons out of them. A tray slipped. I caught it by the rim with 2 fingers and put it down so gently the metal forgot to complain. The nurse wrote something polite on a chart and did not say impossible. Pain receded to a polite advisory. Not gone, just demoted to something that filed reports instead of running the meeting. Joints that had negotiated every step now signed off on plans without comment. Old aches checked their lockers and left quietly. If a ladder asked me to consider my knees, I laughed, and the laugh belonged to a chest that had decided breath should always feel like a win. Testing lived at the end of a corridor. Plates weighted like old debts, bars, ropes, racks, a sled with opinions about friction. The tech had a checklist, and the tired excitement of a believer finally allowed to ring the bell. Incremental, he said, and stacked weight the way cautious people stack arguments. small, measured, ready to retreat if the counterpoint arrives. There was no counterpoint. The numbers climbed. My breath stayed conversational. The bar that had once been an intimidation settled into my palms like a handshake I didn't need to prove. I did not roar. That surprised me. The story says you roar. What came instead was quiet, clean, humming certainty. The bar went up because it was told. The sled moved because the ground and I had renegotiated terms. I pulled a rope hand over hand and felt a rhythm older than thought, a machine built for hauling learning. It could also be gentle. The room kept finding its limits, and I kept moving them, as if we were rearranging furniture for a party no one wanted to miss. They measured sprint times in a hall that used to care about echo. Feet found purchase like the floor had been designed around them. Corners arrived and left without complaint. My hands caught a medicine ball thrown with the confidence of a man who didn't mind a broken nose. I returned it fast enough that he learned gratitude. He said, "Again," with the reverence of a priest discovering his god reads the room. Euphoria was not screaming or tears. It was the absence of friction inside sentences like, "I can." No wait, only will. Doors opened before I finished deciding to open them. Lids yielded. Latches found compromise. My body felt tuned, like a note hit and held without wobble. Even hunger felt reasonable, big, honest, solvable. Food arrived in trays that pretended to be medicine. I ate and the world agreed. The mirror taught the strangest lesson. Strength is visible, yes, but it also changes how you see. Angles made sense. Distance felt negotiable. I reached for a shelf and did not brace for the surprise of pain. My voice, when I said, "Water, please," came out lower, even, calm. I liked it. Liking frightened me, because liking is the easiest habit to keep. The choirmaster visited between tests like an owner walking past a finished house. "Order," he said softly, watching the numbers settle into columns that would be slides later. "Peace." He didn't say obedience. He didn't have to. Ease is its own command structure. When everything yields, it is difficult to remember why you ever argued. They took me to the yard at dusk. A rectangle of sky saved for good behavior. I picked up a concrete block, felt its complaint, and set it above my head until the complaint turned into respect. A woman in the next lane raised hers and grinned. The big, honest grin of someone who has just remembered the word possible. We didn't speak. Euphoria does not need conversation. It needs witnesses. Night brought a different test. An alarm chirped somewhere, the tired sound of a sensor that wanted attention, and two guards jogged past with purpose that didn't include me. The old me would have tracked them with curiosity, maybe the itch to help. The new me watched them go and felt the stillness of a dog who knows the fence and likes the yard. The ease in my muscles argued that fences exist for comfort. The part of me with a name didn't disagree as quickly as it should have. I fell asleep to the sound of pumps and the soft applause of paperwork being satisfied. In the dream, a door weighed nothing, and I opened it by thinking yes. I woke with the echo of that permission in my bones and the first hairline crack in the good feeling. If will moves everything, what moves will? The days learn a grid. Wake to the tone, stand to the word, march to the line. The barracks is a rectangle that believes in itself. Rows of bunks, footlockers that close with the same click, floors that refuse to squeak. Order is a comfort you can sleep on. I fold a blanket and the fold stays, a small treaty between will and matter. The choirmaster walks the aisle with his hands behind his back and calls us brothers. The word lands neatly, and does not ask for memories to back it up. We recite before food, not prayers exactly. Unity chants, call and response with the cadence of a metronome teaching breath. One purpose, one strength, one peace. The air in my chest vibrates at the same note as the voices to either side, and the harmony feels like being correct. The old mind, underneath, asks for adjectives. Whose purpose? Which peace? And finds that questions have been placed behind glass for safety. Roles filter into place like sediment. Enforcers, that's me now, wear the simple harness and the simple look. Forward, steady, disciplined. Nightkin flow around the edges, shimmering when their cloaks forget what light should do. They speak less and smell like batteries. When the choirmaster says scout, their eyes brighten the way mine do at lift. They have a private catechism and call its side effects the hum. No one corrects them. Hums are allowed if they serve the song. Handlers live in the corridors between us and orders. Not scientists, clerks of obedience. They log compliance, shape responses, feed slogans through patient mouths until the slogans begin to answer questions before the questions are fully formed. They never say mind control. They say alignment. Alignment tastes clean like antiseptic. Training is precise. We drill escorts first, 2 by 2, shoulder to shoulder, the distance between frames regulated like traffic. We practice recruitment on a yard painted with lanes. Approach, surround, disarm, invite. The word invite wraps a steel cable in velvet. It feels better than seize and functions the same. When I lift a resisting body the way one lifts an argument, firmly, without cruelty, the handler nods and makes a mark I want him to make again. Excellent control, no variance. Raids are next. The briefing room likes bullet points. Target, stock. Secondary, salvage. Opportunity, talent acquisition. The first time I hear a human called talent, the word does not snag. It is efficient. It avoids the old hesitations about faces and their inconvenient details. The choirmaster threads history through his slides. The master as proof that sameness can quiet the world. He calls what we do a continuation, a remnant duty. We do not chant then, but our breathing arrives in sync. Uniformity bleeds into preference. I begin to enjoy the cleanliness of a room with one purpose. The mess is lined plates and quiet appetites that never quite finish being satisfied. The yard is weights that don't roll when you tell them not to. The armory is a sermon about maintenance, wipe, oil, count, return. I line tools by size and find peace in the sequence. When a new brother fumbles a latch, my hand corrects his without thinking. He thanks me by repeating the rule aloud so we can hear our certainty. Recreation is a word the barracks allows with a small smile. We throw medicine balls that would have been kegs in another life. We run lanes drawn with chalk so straight you want to respect them. At first I look for cards, stories, the casual sin of laughter. Then I stop looking. Laughter arrives only when sanctioned. A brief flare when someone executes a drill so beautifully, even order feels proud. Language trims itself like hedges. Sentences lose the weeds at their edges. We say secure instead of protect, neutralize instead of stop, recruit instead of take. No one orders us to speak this way. The words stand nearer to the tasks than the old ones did. The mouth chooses the shorter path. When a handler asks me what children represent in a contested zone, my answer is immediate and correct. Division. The word clicks into the slot prepared for it. It feels like a tool that belonged to me all along. There is no oath day I can point to, no needle that delivered obedience. just repetition and the kindness of never being asked to improvise. A wall with clear diagrams, always within reach. The sterility I learned as a footnote becomes a workplace policy. No pairings, no private rooms, no rumors with futures. I accept the rule because the rule accepts me. I tell myself this is what peace looks like when it grows teeth to protect itself. On escort duty, I experience a new pride, being the quiet at the center of a moving circle. A traitor signs a ledger, glances up at my shadow, and does not haggle. We leave with what the choirmaster says is owed to history. On recruitment, I learn the choreography of making worthy people into brothers. The touch that says you will not be harmed if you stop being separate. Worthy is measured by bones, by eyes that do not already look broken, by hands that will hold tools well. I do not think about what unworthy looks like until a Nightkin says, gently, waste. At night, posture drills soften into stillness. I sit on a bunk whose metal gives a little under my weight and study the emptiness I have been awarded. Emptiness used to frighten me. Now it feels like a room designed to be easy to clean. In the dark, the chant repeats without the voice. One purpose, one strength, one peace. The rhythm fits around my thoughts like a well-made harness. I am calm because the harness is not tight, only exact. If there is a doubt, it is small and well-mannered. It knocks before entering. What did I call this? Before. The question arrives sometimes when a handler's pen scratches excellent compliance. I can't find the old word fast enough to interrupt the pleasure of being praised. So I file the doubt under variance and trust the promise that all variance decays. Tomorrow there will be drills. Tomorrow the grid will hold. Orders fit. And fitting feels like a kind of choice I am grateful not to have to make again. On raids, the chant sets our feet, not our minds. One purpose, one strength, one peace. The cadence fits boot falls and weapon checks. It does not fit the tune that drifts out of a tin-roofed shed as we fan across a courtyard. It's only 3 notes, limping, hummed by someone too busy being afraid to sing properly. But my chest remembers it before my head does. I reach for the words and catch only rhythm, like trying to grab smoke that keeps choosing a different wind. Hold perimeter, the handler says. My hands obey. My attention doesn't. The 3 notes circle, pecking at the chant, until both sounds fray. The Nightkin to my left tilts his head like he's hearing a different ghost. He mutters. His name for the static in his skull when the cloak eats the world. I want to tell him this isn't his hum. It's mine. We breach a door that is more apology than barrier. Inside, bags, jars, a stove pretending to be a hearth. A woman backs up with her hands where our rules prefer to see them. A man lowers his eyes, calculating how surrender becomes a kind of bargaining chip. On the cot, a child clutches a toy with the determination of someone who has successfully possessed very little and wants to keep batting 1,000. The toy is a block of wood with a mark scratched in it. 2 notches crossing like a careless star. My breath forgets the chant and becomes numbers I used to count on a market road. Secure, says the handler. The word makes my arms busy. The woman's mouth moves around a plea that the room has already priced. She switches tactics, fast as wind. Please, listen, name, she says my old one. I don't know how she learned it. It's the second shaky bridge people throw when the first one breaks. If the uniform won't stop, maybe the person inside it will. My denial arrives too quickly and too loud. Not me, I say, and hear the new jaw flatten the vowel, turn it into a metal thing that doesn't belong to any house. The woman flinches like I hit her with the sound. Excellent compliance, the handler will write later. I can feel the sentence drafting itself in the rhythm of the scene. I do everything right. Firm, calm, no variance. I take the man's wrist and steer it toward the rope like a teacher guiding a pencil. I lift a crate that needs lifting. I ignore the toy, except I don't. The mark crawls under the skin of my glance and lodges there like a splinter with a story. Back at base, the yard smells like iron, admitting it is tired. We run drills under a sky that pretends it has never seen a vat. The chant behaves. My mouth doesn't. I tell a brother a joke. I remember having liked jokes. And when I reach the hinge word, my tongue chooses a simpler version. Humor becomes humor. We both hear it. He laughs and repeats my error like it's a clever new coinage. I laugh too, but the sound has an extra hinge in it, like a gate that learned a different yard. In the mirror, the jaw looks like discipline carved into stone. I try the old name, the way a mechanic tests a bearing by rolling it in his palm. The first syllable arrives late. The second refuses altogether. I practice around it. Whisper, sing, chant, speak. My mouth cooperates in every way that doesn't matter. The name sits behind my teeth and taps politely to be let out. I find an easier word and tell myself the name wanted rest. Sleep shuffles its deck and deals me raids I have not yet lived. In one, the tin roof shed hums, and I hum back until the handler hears us and replaces the air with orders. In another, the child's toy is heavy as a rifle, and I can't lift it without holding my breath. I wake with the flavor of wood under my tongue and the memory of splinters in lines that do not come from the present. Mission logs praise my posture. Excellent compliance, no variance. I read them the way a hungry person reads menus, with a satisfaction that leaves a colder hunger underneath. Variance used to be my whole personality. Now variance is a problem I am proud to solve by not occurring. The bunk frame keeps the room from echoing too much. I hook a nail under the edge and carve the mark. 2 notches crossing, careless star. The metal complains softly, then accepts. The mark looks wrong on steel, smaller than it should be, like a child's drawing hung in a courtroom. I touch it, and the chant recedes half a step. Like a tide respecting a sandcastle it could crush, but chooses not to. This time, the choirmaster finds me in the yard and asks whether I sleep well. Like stone, I say. He approves. He tells me variance decays, all error collapses under repetition. I nod because nodding is a language he speaks. The tune from the shed tries to shove its way into the space between us, humming something neither of us will write down. I excuse myself by volunteering for extra drills. He looks pleased and calls it alignment. At lights out, the barracks breathes in unison. The hum the Nightkin carry rides the rafters. I lie with my eyes open and let the 3 notes walk up and down my ribs. The bunk frame cools under my hand. When the guard makes his last pass, I slide my palm over the scratched star and practice a wordless answer to a question the chants don't ask. It helps, briefly. In the morning I will say, "Humor" again, and someone will laugh. And the day will fit like a uniform on a body that keeps changing size underneath. The cracks aren't breaks. They are lines that refuse paint. And for now, what won't stick is still mine. Briefing room, white light, straight lines. The board lists today's nouns: settlement, recruitment, supplies. Then the extra line that makes the rest taste like metal. Secondary, protect asset. a pre-war stack in a concrete vault that still believes in forever. The Choirmaster says continuation of duty. The handler translates to our working verbs: seize, secure, preserve. I nod because nodding is the shape of yes my neck learned here. The chant sits warm behind my teeth, ready to be useful. We step through the gate at first light. Nightkin flow ahead, ripples where air forgets itself. Enforcers, we, take the midline, big shadows in clean lanes. The settlement wakes wrong, like a song that starts on the last note. Pots crash, shoes slap dirt, shouts breed copies. Our corridor through the crowd is geometry, not cruelty. Secure, recruit, preserve. Shots arrive, probing, not yet angry. The asset sits in a blockhouse at the far edge, humming the old world's lullaby. A handler on the ridge pipes the priority code. Asset protection supersedes all other objectives. It lands with the comfortable weight of a rule that knows it will be obeyed. To my left, a Nightkin whispers the catechism's spine. Unity first. We fan, we mark, we move. Then the variable enters the equation on small legs. A child breaks from a doorway and runs, a bright mistake along our lane. She dives behind a slab that makes bad cover for small bodies, an excellent cover for the men she doesn't know are using her blind. I track them, not her. The efficient solution is a line through the slab that resolves both problems at once. My hands lift because they are good hands, trained and proud. The handler's voice pins the geometry down. Protect the asset at all costs. I have costs to spend. The chant tightens, ready to be the path of least resistance. She clutches something, a toy block, crude, 2 notches crossed. Careless star. My chest finds a rhythm older than the chant. Sibling under a tarp, rain on rust. Our little carpentered signature on caravan rails so we'd know which wagon was ours. The mark is not a word, so it slips past the filters. It just is. And that is enough. My grip loosens a fraction, the space where variance breathes. The handler sees the stall and repeats priority in a calmer tone, meant to erase hesitation. Asset. All costs. The Nightkin to my right tilts, cloak hissing. Unity first, he murmurs again, like a hand on a shoulder. I say the answer I've been taught. Unity first, and hear the second word, scrape. I reroute the plan in the language the system understands. Secure can mean make it unstealable. Clear can mean no one can move through. Preserve can mean force a pause. I step into the child's cover so my frame becomes the slab, an ugly, undeniable wall. Rounds slap my plating and argue about angles. The handler barks maintain lane. I answer affirm and keep not doing it. He changes tactics. Execute neutralization. I reply with the kind of obedience that passes audits. Neutralizing conduit. The generator hut sits 3 strides left, feeding the vault, the gates, the lights that make people think arguments have rules. I cross in 2, shoulder the door, taste ozone, and find the artery. Fat cable in a throat of rust. One pull, and the settlement exhales into dark. Sirens cough, then die. Locks forget their mission. The asset hum, stutters, and drops to a stubborn whisper that says, heavy now. Heavier if you touch me. I've made it safer by making it impossible to move fast. I've also made aiming difficult for anyone who isn't built to see in this noise. Asset status? The ridge demands. I report stable, immobilized. I leave the word exposed out because a truth can be unhelpful before it becomes useful. The men behind the slab swear in the old dialect of cowards and peel backward into smoke. I turn, squat, and offer the child my palm like a floor. She crawls onto it because children know a bridge when they see one. Her toy taps my glove, wood on polymer, a small old sound. And the notches line up with scratches I did not know I'd put there. A round finds the seam under my arm where I've been meaning to ask for reinforcement. Pain files a report and goes to lunch. My hand stays level. The child slides to an aunt who drags her into a doorway and curses me with a gratitude she will regret later. The handler transmits adjusted objective. Hold asset perimeter until power is restored with the strained brightness of someone pretending the plan never changed. The Nightkin clicks disapproval in his throat and fades into the kind of invisibility that feels like judgment. We hold. We don't advance because advance is loud without lights, and today must end quiet. When the dust decants and the crowd's breath finds a new cadence, the ridge calls retask to base. Voice thin, victory shaped. I answer yes in the way a lever answers gravity. On the walk back, the chorus tries to retake the room behind my teeth. One purpose, one strength, one peace. The words fit, but the mark on the glove keeps abrading them. The choirmaster meets us at the gate, satisfied as a ledger. Asset preserved, collateral minimized. He reads off the face of the day. He calls it proof that variance decays into order if the will is disciplined. I nod with the rest, because nodding is what keeps air breathable here. In the barracks, I wash the glove and the notches stay because they were cut, not painted. The bunk accepts my weight like it expected me to come home. I lie back and test the arm that took the hit. It complains just enough to remind me I own it. Across the aisle, a brother snores in chant cadence. I press my thumb to the scratched star I made nights ago and discover the points line up perfectly with the toys. The fit is a crime that feels like a prayer. Tomorrow there will be a room with white walls and kind voices. They will call it realignment and praise my decisive protection of the asset. They will subtract what they can and label the remainder an excellent compliance anomaly. Tonight I have a mark that answers back when the chant asks who I am. Tonight I am two orders that learned how to share oneself without breaking. Yet, the room is white without being kind. Walls with no corners to stare into. A chair that decides posture for you. The handler calls it realignment, as if my skull were a scope and the world kept drifting left. We begin with breathing. In for unity, out for variance. I count because numbers don't argue. They feed me sentences the way you feed seedlings light. One purpose, one strength, one peace. I repeat until my mouth memorizes the timing better than my mind does. A metronome clicks under the speaker's voice, and my answers land in the slots like bolts finding threads. When I miss a beat, the choirmaster smiles the way teachers do when they are pleased to discover the lesson will need to be taught again. No torture, just time. Nutrient paste at standard intervals, drills for the frame so the body keeps agreeing with itself. Hold the stance, maintain the line, stare at the dot until the dot remembers it is center. They play recordings of the raid and cut them to the story they want. Asset preserved, collateral minimized. My reroute, the generator, the blackout, the palm as bridge, gets labeled decisive asset protection under stress. The report praises compliance. I am congratulated for obedience to the objective I bent. The bending is erased by the word decisive. Error decays, the choirmaster says in his good voice. All variance collapses under repetition. He never looks angry. Anger would be variance. He looks pleased to discover that I am teachable. I am. Teaching tastes like rest. They take autonomy the way a tide takes footprints. No order says less thinking. Orders say inventory stores, move crates, stand post, recite on the hour. Tasks without edges. Days without chances to choose. I miss nothing specific, and that feels like a diagnosis. The old name recedes like a shoreline seen from a boat that doesn't turn around. I can outline it with my tongue against my teeth, ridge, dip, glide, and still fail to make sound. I know, in the way a manual knows, that I saved a life. The knowledge sits on the shelf where pride used to live and gathers no dust because the room cleans itself. At lights out, the barracks breathes in time. I trace the scratched star under the bunk and feel the places where steel resisted and then agreed. The mark is not a word, so it survives the catechism. The chant arrives. One purpose, one strength, one peace, and settles over the day like a blanket smoothed flat. I sleep without dreams, which the handler will call progress in the morning. He will mark excellent compliance, the ledger will nod, and the part of me that still knows what a splinter is will press its thumb to the star and hold on until the count reaches 0. The grid holds. Wake, recite, work, recite, sleep. Variance decays like rain and dust. The choirmaster's smile stays where he left it. The handler's pen scratches excellent compliance at a tempo my breath now copies without being told. The mirror returns a jaw that has stopped negotiating. The name does not arrive. It sends no letter. I learn quiet crafts. How to lift crates so sound dies under my hands. How to count without moving my lips. How to stand between trouble and instructions until one of them gives up. How to let the chant move through me and not take everything it asks for. Some nights, the Nightkin's hum settles into the rafters like weather, and the barracks sleeps in one piece. On those nights, I can almost believe this is peace. Not a lie, just a smaller truth, trimmed to fit the room. I lie still and let time inventory me. Arms, functional. Back, strong. Mind, aligned. Variance, decaying. The ledger approves. The star under the bunk stays. Steel remembers notches better than mouths remember names. When I press my thumb to the crossed scratches, a pulse answers that doesn't belong to muscles. No voices, no rebellion. Just a small refusal to be completely finished. The mark is not a word, so the catechism can't sand it down. It doesn't argue with unity. It refuses to be classified by it. On escort, I pass a fence where children have braided wire into a pattern that almost looks like ours. One of them hums 3 notes wrong and is pleased anyway. The tune follows me until the gate, then learns manners and stops. I file the feeling where feelings go now, behind maintenance, under alignment. Once, a handler asks for a demonstration of voice control. I tell the recruits the rules: calm, even, steady, exactly as taught. At the end, I add a sentence that sounds like an instruction and is only a memory. Hold the line you can carry. He marks it down as morale phrasing. The recruits nod like they've learned a drill. Maybe they have. Lights out. The room breathes to the beat that keeps us. I press my thumb to the star and try the old mouth shape in the dark. Air moves, nothing escapes. That's all right. I was wrong. The last word I keep isn't something you say. It's something you touch. A pressure you choose. A line you refuse to sand away. I sleep with my hand on the steel and dream of doors that open because a mark on a glove and a mark under a bunk agree about what enough means. The grid will hold tomorrow. So will this.